announcement. So go ahead, Stacy and Ann. Thank you.
Thanks, Carla and John. I'm going to take a moment here and set up my slideshow to share. So if you'll bear with me for a minute while I get that going, I'd appreciate it. I'm new to sharing all this stuff. So here we go.
Did you share your screen?
I'm about to.
Okay.
It's all these notes that take a while to get set up. Okay.
That looks great, Stacy.
Okay, good. Well, thanks everybody. And thanks Carla to inviting Ann and I to present on the Heron of March Point. Before Ann shows her beautiful slides and takes you on this incredible visit to the Heronry, I wanted to take a little time to introduce Skagit Land Trust and the March Point Conservation Area. And I'll also give you a little overview of some of the heron-related community science projects that we do through the Land Trust. But if you're not familiar with Skagit Land Trust, we were founded in 1992 with the mission to conserve wildlife habitat, agricultural and forest lands, scenic open space, wetlands and shorelines for the benefit of our community and as a legacy for future generations. 30 years later, the amount of land and habitat protected through the trust has grown to over 10,000 acres. And this map shows trust-owned properties. It's a couple of years old, this map. But in addition to trust-owned properties, we also partner with other entities and private landowners to protect other important conservation lands. One of the trust's first acquisitions in 1994 was through a donation of land at March Point in Anacortes, with the goal to protect a heronry that had been there since at least the 1950s. Through subsequent acquisitions, the trust now protects nearly 11 acres, and T. Bailey, our neighbor to the west, protects an additional 5 acres through a conservation easement. This aerial view lets you see how the heronry is nestled between Highway 20 and Padilla Bay and hemmed in by industry and development all around it. This map shows the current protected area of the heronry. Trust property is outlined in yellow, and the conservation easement with T. Bailey is outlined in purple. So why is it important to conserve this property? March Point is the largest nesting site of great blue heron in the west coast of the United States. So as such, it's the primary breeding center for great blue heron in the Salish Sea, and the birds that are raised here contribute significantly to the genetic diversity of the region. In addition, the tendency of Salish Sea heron to nest in mega colonies, such as the one at March Point, make these colonies especially vulnerable to human disturbance. And this increased human impact has caused other colonies in the Salish Sea region to abandon entirely, including another large heronry protected by the trust on Samish Island that completely abandoned in 2017. But despite its very compact size, March Point offers ideal nesting habitat and proximity to prime foraging habitat. For great blue herons to thrive, they need mature coastal forests with trees tall enough and strong enough to support large nests 50 feet or more above the ground, along with nearby access to sufficient fish to meet the caloric demands of their young. Comprised primarily of conifers, big leaf maple, and red alder, the March Point Heronry Forest is perched above Padilla Bay, whose 8,000 acres of eelgrass provide perfect habitat for the forage fish needed by the nesting great blue heron. But because suitable habitat for nesting has significantly diminished in the Puget Sound region, the importance of conserving March Point cannot be overstated. And not only is it important to conserve the remaining heronries around the Sailor Sea, but it's important to monitor them, to see whether the heronry is expanding or contracting in the number of nests, and whether the border of the colony is moving within the conservation area. Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife recommends that year-round seasonal buffers be maintained between the colony and potentially intrusive activities. So it's important to know where the herons are nesting from year to year. On the map to the left, you can see that the herons have changed which trees they've used over the years, and the boundary of the colony has shifted. In 2021, that's the red-lined boundary. You can see that it's moved quite a bit over from the 2012 boundary, which is in light pink. The chart on the right shows that the number of nests has also varied over time. And it's also important to assess the health of the colony by looking at the overall productivity of the heronry. Through monitoring, we can ascertain how many eggs were laid and how many chicks survived through fledging. We can also establish a timeline for occupancy and breeding and create a baseline by which to evaluate any unusual behavior or the impact of any disruptive behavior or disruptive activity. So currently there are 4 monitoring and surveying community science projects associated with the March Point Heronry. One of my roles at the Trust is to coordinate 3 of these projects, but this work couldn't be done without many dedicated volunteers such as Ann Winkus and several other of you who are on this presentation. And we appreciate the many, many hours contributed to these projects. The first community science project that's done in the area is overseen by Ann Eisinger, who's a wildlife biologist who advises the Trust on our heron work. This is a heron foraging project, and sites at Padilla Bay, Fidalgo Bay, Samish Bay, and Ship Harbor, all foraging grounds for March Point, are monitored throughout the nesting season. The purpose of this project is to document heron feeding locations and concentrations, feeding behavior, and prey species. And through this project, a heat map is created. This is the 2016 heat map, which is generated through data collected through this project, and it shows where foraging occurs that year. The areas indicated in red on this map show where the highest concentration of foraging was observed. The Land Trust conducts a one-day survey called the Active Tree Survey. We started this project in 2018, and soon after the herons depart from the colony, the staff and volunteers walk through the property looking below the nest trees for whitewash, discarded eggshells, feathers, and bird carcasses. We do this immediately after the heron leaves so that the evidence is fresh and before leaves fall from the trees and rain washes away any of the evidence. And we do this because nests can persist over the years, even if they're not used. So knowing which trees were used, combined with the nests counted later in the year, provide a more complete picture of how many nests were actually occupied. And then later, after the leaves have fallen from the deciduous trees, volunteers go up and count the number of nests in each tree during another one-day survey. The Trust provides our nest count information and location information to WDFW, and they create heronry maps, and along with their management recommendations for priority species, guide the planning departments of Skagit County and the city of Anacortes for projects planned to near all known heronries, including that of March Point. There's also ongoing ground-based nesting observations, which were conducted periodically since 2013 and then annually since 2019. Monitors watch activity in the heronry from outside, particularly focusing on impacts due to predators or unusual human-caused activity. One thing to note about March Point is that there has been an occupied eagle nest for many years, and there's normally predation that goes on through the season, but these monitors are watching for that and anything else unusual. though they're watching from a distance, they have a very good broad overall view and can see any heron reaction. These volunteers have experience in identifying heron sounds, which helps confirm the breeding phases occurring, even if they're unable to see into the nests. And having a team on the ground has also helped identify potential disturbance, such as road work, which might occur on March Point Road, right below the Heronry. In 2022, 3 state-of-the-art cameras were installed up in the Heronry, replacing a single camera that had been on site since about 2006, but not consistently since 2006. What's nice about these cameras is they can be operated from the volunteer's home computer. As you can see on the picture of on the right, one of our volunteers, Sue Ayler, is always accompanied by her cockatoo as she's watching through the camera. But having 3 cameras gives the trust to look into hundreds of nests and will provide us a more accurate sense of what is going on in the Heronry. This was our pilot year. We had 3 teams of 4 volunteers, which observed each nest 2 times per week between reoccupation and fledgling. So next, Ann Winkus, who is both a part of the ground observation team and the North Camera team, will give us an in-depth look at her experiences and what she and her team witnessed this year. But if any of you, after this presentation, are interested in participating in any of these community science projects, please give me an email at stacyd@skagitlandtrust.org. And I'm going to stop sharing, and then Ann's going to take it from here.
Oops.
It looks fine, Ann. Your
Okay,
screen.
I'm just trying to move all the people out of my view.
Move them off. Yeah, right.
So good. If you can hear me and see it, we're all set. Thanks, Stacy, for that excellent rundown of Skagit Land Trust's Community Science March Point Heronry monitoring. And thank you, Skagit Audubon, for inviting us to talk with you about what's been happening at the March Point Heronry. I wasn't surprised when I first looked through the north camera to see this pair of herons perched on a limb with their backs turned to me. Some herons tolerate being around humans and raise their young in urban colonies. I remember the amazement I felt the first time I visited the Ballard Locks and walked along the sidewalk below the nesting herons. March Point herons, however, are very shy of humans, squawking loudly, flushing from their nests whenever humans approach. Because of this behavior, as you've heard from Stacy, for the past 4 years, we have observed the March Point Heronry from outside the Heronry, standing with spotting scope and binoculars on the gravel area across the road from T. Bailey, standing on the site of the March Point landfill, and walking along South March Point Road below the Heronry. As interesting and useful these roadside observations have been and will continue to be, observing via the wildlife cameras this past season has opened up a whole new world to us, giving us a bird's eye view, if you will, of some behaviors we'd only read about and some we knew nothing about. Crowded in there, aren't they? Great blue herons are indeed colonial nesters, positioning their nests close to one another, either apartment style, one above the other, as you can see on the right and in the center, or horizontally placed, as you can see on the left. Nest sizes and shapes vary a lot. You can see 2 large, deep ones on the right, several in the center, and one on the far left. Others are small and shallow, almost flat, as in the lowest nest on the right. But all of them seem to work well for rearing heron young. Close up, you can see that their basic structure is made from sticks that are 9 to 12 inches long, about the thickness of a pencil. Herons add additional sticks throughout the season, primarily when eggs are laid and again when the chicks hatch. Raising chicks is hard on nests. This adult is carefully placing a stick following the hatching of its first chick. Our camera views have shown us that many of the March Point herons place an insulating ring of twigs around their eggs, usually fir, as you see here, but sometimes cedar and occasionally alder. This incubating heron added fir and alder to its nest when temperatures during the wee hours of the morning hovered around 48. This heron lost its first clutch and added more insulating twigs with this, its second clutch. Usually, whether constructing nests or reinforcing nests, it's the male who brings the nesting material and the female who positions it. Here, a male flies in with a stick for its mate. They are reinforcing their nest after the chicks have hatched. She carefully places a stick, and then he returns with another. He offers it, she grasps it, and places it where she wants it. Canadian studies have shown that large nests like this one don't have more eggs earlier in the season than small ones like this, nor do they fledge more young at the end of the season. We saw confirmation of those findings this past spring when we watched from the road as an adult pair built a new nest, making multiple trips between an alder on the side of the road from which they broke off sticks to the tree above South March Point Road in which they built their nest. The nest was very small, sparse, and flat like the one in this photo, but they successfully reared young to fledglings. One heron pair I watched on the north camera successfully raised 3 hatchlings through to fledglings from a small, shallow nest. The fledglings made it, but the nest didn't last through the season. Here they are, young enough for both parents to still be guarding them. The whole family fits on the nest. As they grew larger, the space grew smaller. Here they are, 10 days later, filling the nest as they sleep huddled together. 2 weeks after that, the nest is beginning to fall apart. By the time these 3 become fledglings, they will be almost as large as their parents, nearly 4 feet tall, with 6-foot wingspans. See if you can find the nest in this photo, taken 2 weeks before they fledged. It's pretty much gone, destroyed by growing teenagers fighting for food, flapping their wings, hopping about on nearby branches. About a week or 2 before the March Point herons enter the heronry to begin breeding and nesting, they gather together in a behavior called staging in large numbers outside the heronry. Not all heron colonies stage, but March Point herons have done so for many years. On the Dredgeville Islands in the Swinomish Channel, as you see here, and on the railroad track across from the Heronry. This past spring, we counted 140 of them gathered on the railroad tracks on March 4th, the same day the herons first reoccupied the colony. We watched from the ground that day a phenomenon we hadn't witnessed before. Groups of 50 or so herons in a kind of dance swooped in and out of the Heronry, landing on the railroad track, then flying back to the Heronry, back to the railroad track, back to the Heronry, with some eventually remaining on nests. Here are herons continuing to reoccupy the Heronry, as seen from one of the cameras 6 days later. Males enter the Heronry first, choosing nests, reinforcing old nests, sometimes building new ones, and await the females. This is a male in full advertising display with his lower neck, scapular, and back feathers erect, his bill a bright orange, announcing, "This is my nest." The business of selecting mates takes place over a week or two. Herons form monogamous bonds just for the nesting season. With the cameras, we were able to see that courtship rituals continue even after the female has begun to lay eggs. I was able to capture segments of a courtship sequence from the north camera on March 30th. Here's the pair just hanging out. Here they are, 41 seconds later, wing preening simultaneously. 10 minutes later, a courtship display has begun. Low neck, scapular, back, and head feathers are erect. Bills are bright orange. One rapidly chatters its bill at the other. The other chatters back. 20 seconds later, they are bill dueling. The female grabs the male's bill and holds on until he gives in and allows her to remain in his nest. Eggs are laid asynchronously over about a week. One egg, then a day or two later, another, until typically 3 to 5 eggs have been laid. Heron parents take turns incubating eggs. While one parent incubates, its mate may be nearby preening, as here, sleeping, watching, or off foraging. Herons rarely leave their eggs unattended. Incubation shifts are long, lasting 10 hours or more. During its shift, the incubating parent stands up about once an hour, shakes and fluffs out its feathers, turns around and sits back down. Every 2 hours, it carefully tends the eggs. This is an egg tending sequence I captured from the north camera on April 2nd of a heron tending 5 eggs. Here, moving the eggs, done with one, on to the next, and another, just about done. And now back to incubating. As you've just seen, herons are remarkably handy with their long bills, but thanks to the cameras, I've learned they are equally handy with their feet. Herons' toes are long and flexible. As herons walk, they spread their toes out wide, allowing them to walk easily on mud without sinking and through eelgrass without getting tangled up. Their pectinated toenail, which you can see here, allows them to scratch their skin and their feathers. Their flexible toes grip branches tightly. I now know they also use their feet to gently shimmy eggs into position. Look at this heron's left foot. And though I wasn't able to catch it in a photo sequence, I watched as they would slide a foot beneath a hatchling and lift it into place before settling down to brood. Look at this parent's left foot beneath the hatchling, and you can picture that lift happening. Looking at the enormity of this foot relative to the eggs and the hatchlings, I am amazed at how nimble and gentle they are. As the eggs are laid asynchronously, they are hatched asynchronously. It takes a chick about 2 days to become entirely free of its shell. This is the first chick hatched in North Nest 62. It's several days before all the eggs hatch. Here's the next hatchling on North Nest 62, 4 days later. You can see the pip hole in the shell behind. New hatchlings are very small, weighing about 2 ounces and nearly naked with just a bit of fluffy down. The first hatched chicks have a head start on the later hatched, as they're larger, and you can see the difference between the sizes of these two. They have a clear advantage in the fight for food. The last chicks to hatch often die. If they do survive, they grow more slowly and remain in the nest longer before fledging. Here, in these 2 chicks from North Nest 20R, you can see the persistent size difference as they age. Here are the same 2 at 42 days of age. The size difference still distinct as they stand together. Perhaps even more obvious when standing together asleep. The oldest fledged at 61 days of age, the other 5 days later. In the first 3 weeks of life, heron chicks can't be left on their own. They are unable to maintain their body temperature, and their small size makes them vulnerable to predators. Heron parents continue to take turns staying with the chicks. Here is a sequence I captured of 1-week-old chicks being carefully adjusted into position by their brooding parent. First, using its left leg. Now, with its right. Now, with its bill. Just about right, but needs yet 1 more stick. Got it? And now back to brooding. While brooding, one parent remains at the nest to provide warmth and guard the chicks. The other may be out foraging or may be standing by watching or preening. Here are parents of 4-day-old chicks, both at the nest, the brooding adult standing above the chicks as if alarmed, its mate alerting to a threat. Now the brooding parent screams, shielding the chicks with its wings. 10 seconds later, both adults are settling down. 15 minutes later, all is back to normal. By around 3 weeks of age, one parent can't provide enough food. The chicks can now maintain their own body temperature and are large enough to be safe, or at least safer, from predators, so the adults leave the chicks unattended as they search for food. Here are 1-month-olds waiting for their parents' return. And here's how they behave when the parent does come back. Feed me, feed me. Heron chicks' caloric demands are huge. They grow from about 2 ounces to almost 5 pounds in 2 months, with their greatest growth occurring between around 10 and 40 days of age, During that time, each adult requires the same number of calories for its own daily needs as does each chick. Most heron parents are caring for 2 to 3 chicks. That means the adults are having to catch a whole lot of small fish. Thanks to the cameras, we've learned lots about how heron young eat, and we've learned some about heron mouths. This is a 7-day-old with its mouth wide open, yelling for food. That pinkish glob is part of the tongue. And here's a look at the inside of an adult's mouth. The tongue is attached below the mandible, allowing more space for a large fish to go down. The enlarged tongue papillae help position the fish for swallowing. Hatchlings begin to eat food the parents have regurgitated into the nest soon after hatching. Watch the chick whose wide open mouth you just saw getting fed at 8 days of age. It initiates the feeding, reaching for the parent's bill, holds onto the bill as the parent lowers its head. You can see the bulge of fish in the adult's throat pouch. Lets go of the bill and positions its beak at the tip of the parent's bill, ready to eat when the food comes down. The parent regurgitates. You can see a morsel of fish at the end of the parent's open bill. Success. The chick has the fish. Levi Shelton's captured a remarkable sequence of a chick around 5 days old struggling to swallow a fish that seems decidedly too large for it. Here's the parent doing we don't know what, trying to pull it out, reposition it, stuff it in. Still struggling. And here comes another fish. Hopefully this coming season we'll get some good looks at what the adult does when the fish are clearly too large for the hatchlings. As they grow, the young herons swallow as much as they can right from the mouth of the parent. Watch this 1-month-old. Beak open expectantly, grabs the parent's bill, hangs on crosswise. Now the parent feeds directly into the 1-month-old's mouth. Not yet done. Now the second parent tries to stuff more in. And the first lends a hand, or I should say bill. A couple of minutes later, the 1-month-old is going after bits of dropped food. Adults continue to feed their young until they fledge at 2 months of age. The parents almost seem to hesitate before feeding their rapidly growing, aggressive, hungry adolescents. Watching them, I think you'll understand why. Here's what happens when the parent arrives back at the nest filled with teenagers. The adolescent, almost as large as the adult, grabs the parent's bill and pulls its head into the nest. The parent drops the food and the teenagers scramble for it. A feeding frenzy ensues. 6 seconds later, up they come, demanding more. The parent drops more and flees the nest. The cameras have provided us with multiple curiosities needing further study. One for me is, do heron eat bugs? They certainly look like they do, but we've yet to catch the bug on camera. We'll see adults and young appear to be peering intently at something near the nest, like this one is. Then suddenly thrusting their head forward, grabbing it, whatever it is. Here are 1-month-olds similarly peering and going after something of great interest. Bugs, maybe. And here's a near fledgling poking around a nest that's been empty for 10 days. What's it after? Maybe this coming season will solve the mystery. Heron chicks get to their feet by 2 weeks of age. Here's the 8-day-old we watched feeding earlier, learning to stand erect. We last saw it tipped forward, fish in beak. Fish finished, its wings are up. 4 seconds later, it's erect. Still wobbly, it tips forward again. Now, once again, erect. Here's a 10-day-old chick, still working on standing. By 3 weeks of age, heron young walk steadily. Here's a 3.5-week-old checking things out, walking so steadily, it's venturing right off the nest. But not for long. 2 seconds later, a parent has blocked further adventuring. By 4 weeks of age, heron young begin to flap their wings. Here's one giving it a try. Faster and faster. Slowing up. And now its sibling on the left gives it a try. Flapping, picking up speed, turning around and heading back. A minute and a half later, they're checking out the known world. Might be one of those tasty bugs. By 7 weeks, they are really cruising along. Switched directions, moving faster, making short hops to nearby branches. In another 2 weeks, they'll be gone. The nesting season this year was very long, lasting from March 4th to September 11th. The length was attributable to some herons laying second clutches after losing their first young. This photo demonstrates that clearly. The adult heron on the right is tending its second clutch of eggs adjacent to a nest on which a maturing heron, almost ready to fledge, is standing. Other herons take advantage of nests with failed clutches. I watched this heron take multiple sticks from a nest the day after the first attempt to raise young in it had failed. Some heron successfully raised their second clutch, others failed with both. Here's a pair the day after a second failed attempt to rear young. 1 hour later, only one remains. I can't help but wonder, looking at the dejected posture of this parent who attempted to rear young twice and failed, if herons, like humans, experience depression. Raising young herons isn't easy. Parents and their young face multiple threats on their path to fledging. Bald eagles are one of the greatest threats to herons successfully rearing young. They eat heron eggs, heron chicks, and occasionally an adult heron. March Point Heronry does have a resident pair of eagles who unsuccessfully attempted to raise young this past year. Sue Ayler took this remarkable photo of a bald eagle's view into the heronry. Interestingly, though we could hear bald eagle calls and chat, while watching the cameras and hear the uproar of distressed herons, we never witnessed an eagle in the act of predation. Through the camera's eyes, however, we were able to watch adult eagles defending their young. Shirley Ho captured on the north camera this remarkable sequence of a parent protecting its young as an eagle cry was heard over the camera audio. Neck feathers erect, wings spread protectively covering the chick. Look carefully, and you'll see that the chick beneath the shelter of its parent has also spread its wings. A half a minute later, the chick looks out from behind, wings spread, neck and head feathers erect, as are its parents. 3 minutes later, the adult is settling down, its head and neck feathers relaxing, the chick back under the parent's protective wings, still peering out, top knot erect. Here's another photo taken by Sue Ayler of the resident bald eagles this past year, this time taken from outside the heronry. It clearly shows the eaglet's head above the nest rim. It's just to the left of the adult. We don't know why their attempt to raise young failed this past year, but this was the last day the eaglet was seen in the nest. 12 days later, Stacy Dahl was looking at the nest via one of the cameras and saw this: herons on the eagle nest stealing sticks. One of the stranger things the camera revealed about life in the heronry. You take my chicks, I'll steal your sticks. Heron young need protection from the elements as well as from predators. Weather can be a significant threat to successfully raising young. This past season, the herons experienced torrential rains off and on in the spring. Here's a brooder keeping her hatchlings warm in a downpour. And here you can see an adult moving from one side of its young to the other, attempting to give them some protection from a deluge. Here's that same nest 50 minutes later, all still wet, finishing up a feeding, finding the last tidbits on the bottom of the nest. 6 minutes later, one chick on the left with eyes closed as if asleep, the other two waiting for more food. The littlest in the front, definitely still hungry, stares at its older resting sibling, opens its beak, and grabs hold of its sibling's bill, while the parent preens and the other sib turns its back. No food there. In case you're like me and worry about these little ones, they do make it through the night. Here they are the next morning, and all grow into strong fledglings, even though their size differences are dramatic at this age. Clearly, the littlest hatched last. They are the 3 that destroyed the nest I showed you earlier in the presentation. Heat also stresses herons. Herons cool off by opening their mouths and fluttering their throats, and by opening and drooping their wings. Here's throat fluttering in an incubating adult in the sun on June 24th. The high in Anacortes that day was 75. Here are 2 very hot adolescents, also on June 24th, using that same throat fluttering technique. They're so hot, their top knots look wilted. Here's a parent with wings open and drooped, shading its young chicks from the sun on July 11th, when it was 76 in Anacortes. This pair is working together to shade their young. The one in front opening and drooping its wings, the one behind with a throat flutter. And here they are, simply shading the young with their bodies. This one is my favorite, a 25-day-old trying to keep cool with open, drooped wings and throat fluttering. Wind can wreak havoc at March Point. Watching the nests in a wind through the camera lens swaying crazily is a wild ride. Here's a brooder hunkered down just after a gust lifted up its feathers. Wind at March Point can blow nests down. It's not unusual to find whole nests on the ground during the fall nest count. In 2017, a windstorm with gusts up to 50 miles per hour struck the March Point Heronry. 2 days later, Jim Sheltons entered the Heronry to work on the old heron cam and found 2 large maple trees down, multiple nests on the ground, 25 dead chicks, and some live ones. Look in the center of the photo on the right, and you can see one of the live ones peeking out through the leaves. 6 of the chicks were captured and taken to Wolf Hollow Wildlife Rehabilitation Center. 1 of the chicks survived. Here, in this photo taken by Sue Ayler, you see it on the day it was released, heading back to the wild. Heron young are also threatened by sibling aggression. If knocked from the nest to the forest floor, the young are unable to fly, and the adults don't feed them on the ground. They will die either from starvation or be killed by ground predators. Here are 2 siblings dueling at 42 days of age. And here they are at it again at 55 days of age. Both survived and successfully fledged, the biggest at 61 days of age, the other not till 67 days of age. Thanks to the cameras, we watched young herons' sleep positions evolve from huddled together bundles of fluff to one-legged snoozes. Here, a bundle of nestlings sleeping together around 9 days of age. Here, 21-day-olds sleeping necks wrapped around each other in a bundle. Watch this almost 1-month-old learning to sleep while standing on one leg. Here on the nest rim next to its hunched over siblings, it's standing on its right leg, asleep with its head tucked to the right, its parent with eyes almost closed on a nearby branch. 17 seconds later, both legs down, asleep with head still tucked to the right. 26 seconds later, and its left leg is back up. Its head remains by its right shoulder. 13 seconds later, both legs down again. 30 seconds go by, and the left leg is up again. 6 minutes later, both legs are down, and its head is now tucked beneath the left shoulder, as is that of the nearby sleeping parent. Here's a typical adult sleeping posture, head low between shoulders, facing straight forward, in this case on one leg. Here's another one-legged snoozer, head to the left. Here's an incubator, asleep with head and bill on the rim of the nest. And here's a brooder, asleep with just the tip of its bill on the rim of the nest. The cameras allow us to see behaviors rarely seen. Jim and Levy Sheltons captured an adult heron eating a dead chick. Neither Ann Eisinger, a heron biologist who has studied the March Point herons for many years, nor two expert Canadian heron biologists whom she asked had ever seen this behavior. Take a look. Here, it's picking up the dead chick. Here, swallowing it down. Fledging takes place over several weeks as chicks from eggs that hatched early in the season leave the heronry before those that hatched from second clutches. Here's how the heronry looked on July 18th, the day all three fledglings from nest 52 left the heronry. The site of nest 52, which you've seen they had destroyed, is visible at the back. A brooding adult is visible on the left in the foreground. Just behind it are some maturing young with a preening adult, and some almost fledglings are in the center. Here's the last fledgling visible on the north camera the day it left the heronry, September 7th. Maybe grabbing one last bug before taking off? Once the March Point herons leave the heronry at the end of the nesting season, they don't return until the following spring. Though the heronry is empty, they're still around. The March Point herons are a subspecies of non-migratory heron, year-round residents of Skagit County, just not of the heronry, which is why we see them around here all winter, standing patiently in the fields, hunting voles, huddling together on the uplands, or warming their feet or foot on the refinery pipeline. That's it till the coming season.
Thank you, Ann. That was really great.
Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it.
And yes, thanks to both of you. That was really fascinating. So you guys are doing wonderful work there and learning a lot. So, Neil, can you recap the questions from the chat box?
Yeah, just hold on a second. So we had a couple of people mentioning the location of certain other heronries in Puget Sound. There's apparently one near Ballard Locks down in Seattle, in Commodore Park. And let's see, then Lisa Hopkins was asking about a question that actually got answered during the presentation. Had anybody seen parents remain on the nest even when the praying bald eagle comes by? Lisa used to see the Ballard Locks herons just take off when an eagle came over.
Well, there is something I could say about that. The relationship with the eagles and the herons is really quite interesting. And probably many of you have heard that people theorize that having a resident pair of bald eagles in some ways protects the herons, because the resident eagles will defend their territory and keep some of the other eagles away, so that even though the residents are taking their share of the chicks, they probably diminished the overall amount taken. And interestingly, in Canada, they have reported that when a bald eagle nest, when the eagles who are using a nest in a heronry leave the heronry and build a nest somewhere else, on at least 2 occasions, the herons have moved their heronry to put it where the eagle nest is. So something's going on there. But the other thing that's very interesting is that we've noticed from from the road is that when the eagles aren't threatening the young in any fashion, the herons actually perch right up there on the treetops, right next to the eagles, as if they're just, the best of friends. So it's an interesting relationship.
Right. One more question for you. Have you ever seen, this is from Carla, have you ever seen the parents feeding anything other than fish to their hatchlings? I mean, the adults obviously eat other things, including, it seems, their own dead chicks, but
I have not seen anything other than fish being fed. So I don't know. I do know that, when in the winter, when they're eating voles and things like that, the fledglings, the yearlings are not with their parents at that point. They are having to learn how to feed on their own. So I think the percentage of herons that survive the first year of life is like 25%. So a lot of them die.
right. Another question, this one from Ernie and Ginny Hayden. Are otters a threat to the herons or the heronry? Because I think Ernie and Ginny bird around March Point a great deal and have observed at least 8 otters around there.
Otters. Sorry, I thought you were saying autos, and I was thinking, well, I have seen a dead heron on the side of the road.
I apologize for the English accent.
We've never seen the otters do anything harmful to the herons. We have watched the otters going across the mudflats right there on where the Swinomish Channel meets the March Point landfill. And we've watched, 4 udders marching along right where the herons are, and the herons seem to ignore them, and they seem to ignore the herons. But who knows?
Another one from Ernie Hayden. Some of the herons we see at March's Point have color on their shoulders, usually brown/gold. All the photos showed the adult herons had black shoulders. Thoughts? Actually, I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this one. It's a question of age, I believe.
Well, I think most of the herons will have some kind of a rusty color on their shoulder patch. The younger herons do not have a distinctive shoulder patch at all. I'd have to go back and look at all those photos and see how often they have the rusty patch, but I think it's pretty common.
Yeah, okay, that's interesting, because I think we were using that down. I do part of this. I'm one of the sort of ship foraging people, and I think we were told to use that as one of the indications of a June, like one that was adult, but before it reached breeding age, that was, in other words, that gets black as they get older or something like that.
Yeah, the shoulder patch becomes very definite, and it's black, but there also is a rusty quality to it depending on how their shoulder is, I think, is how you see it. The most distinctive thing, if you're looking at herons and wondering if they're adults or young, is to look for the white stripe on the top of their head, because the young ones do not have that. Once you know that, it's very easy to distinguish them. And the young ones also have lots of stripes, more of a striped appearance to their breasts than the older ones.
Right.
I'm going to mute for a sec because a train is going by our house.
Well, let me take that opportunity to put up the next question, which is from Paul Vance. Are the number of nests limited at March Point based on the availability of sticks and twigs? So when the train's gone by, maybe we can get an answer to that.
The train is gone, or the whistle is gone. Well, there are a lot of sticks out there. And they don't just use dead sticks. We've watched them break off green sticks from trees. I don't know, they also steal one another's sticks a lot, and apparently they steal eagle nest sticks. So I don't know the answer to that, but I think the answer is probably no.
Okay. That I think exhausts the questions, so I think I'll hand it back to Carla.
Thanks, Neil. And thank you again to Anne and Stacy. That was really, really fantastic. And you can tell from all of the, in the chat, many people responded that they really enjoyed it and that you did an excellent job. So thank you so much. And we will record it, and it'll be available on the website in the near future. So thank you so much. And with that, I just want to mention that next month, on Tuesday, the 14th of February, we will have a young person, Chris Williams. He presented to us last year about the birds of the Olympic coast, if you attended that. And he has moved down to Saguaro National Park in Tucson, and he actually has decided he's going to present to us on the topic of the birds of the Sonoran Desert. So we can all think about a warm, sunny place in February, which is kind of a nice thought. So with that, I will say thank you and good night, and we'll hope to see you all next month. Thanks. Bye-bye.